So you mentioned about the amazing work that you've been doing, and what we wanted to know was, can you take us back to 2017 when you and your colleagues at Camrose Open Door Associated decided to move forward with implementing and integrating Youth Hub to meet the youth's needs within the jurisdiction that you work with. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came about, the process, some challenges and barriers that might have occurred during that?
For sure, absolutely. So the reason that we sort of looked at starting a hub in our location was basically purely driven out of need. It's really unique to work in a rural setting. Camrose itself functions sort of as a hub in general, and I mean that by all the grocery stores, your hospitals, your local medical diagnostic, all of that is based out of Camrose. So not only is Camrose, the city of Camrose, a hub, but the Camrose Open Door Association had functioned for about 19 years as an informal hub in terms of the work that we were doing with youth. And so we have and operate more than 15 programs that provide services to youth, and that is everything from housing programs to outreach to 24-hour, our outreach is 24-hour, to 24-hour helpline service, restorative justice, just a ton of different programs. And so it made sense to us that sort of formalizing into a hub would probably give meet the needs of the youth that were more in the rural areas. And so what we did was we did a whole giant one hire, and we hired a navigator. And that navigator's job was to basically collect everything to do with the youth walking through the door and begin that process with them. So I think the easiest way to illustrate that is to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like to walk through our process. So youth and or their families can walk through the door. They can be referred in any way, shape, or form by a friend, by their doctor, by whomever. They come through our door, and that can happen 24/7, 365. So they are going to get help immediately. We are not going to turn them away. They're not waiting for business hours. That does not work with youth. So they come in, they get help immediately. The navigator is going to triage what is going on, and that's going to look like, are you homeless, are you hungry? And then we're going to start going down the list. We function very much using, if you're familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't have things on the bottom, we cannot expect youth to start going into processes around self-actualization when they don't have shelter over their head. So we believe in starting at the very bottom and getting those things stabilized. So that an example of that is our housing program actually doesn't have a time limit on it, because how can you give a time limit to what that's going to look like? So when they come in, you sort of get them triaged, consent is taken, and we start that process. Then we bring, the navigator's job is to bring all the community collaborators together. Some of those are co-located in our building, others are not. And so that navigator's job is to bring everybody together. And what will have happened is that youth will have told their story once to the navigator. And then everything else is shared out through consent and through information sharing. One of the things that we did right away was we raised the flag when we started this, saying that we would not be able to do integrated services in Alberta if we did not have some sort of information sharing protocol. And the government actually stepped in, and the government built us the information sharing protocol. And so we actually are able to share information across, we're talking about health sectors, law sectors, education acts, legislations, all of these things. So we have that capacity to share. We bring all of those care collaborators to the table, and we start figuring out what exactly it is that the youth needs. That can be everything from law enforcement to school to hospitals to mental health to housing to some sort of basic needs. It can be things as basic as the youth is coming in with no ID, with no health care number, with no SIN number, with no address. Some of these things that have been barriers in every other program, they're welcome to come in the door with us. We'll do the journey with them. And so we start those processes, and then the long term with that youth is to get them connected into adult world supports. And so even if they're 16, 17, 18, the hub will continue to follow them and be with them until they've transitioned into successful adult streams. And then the other portion of that obviously is to get them really well connected and really well stabilized. The space that they come into is sort of built by the youth. It's what they want. The primary thing it has is food and a dog, because that's what the kids wanted. And so we've got so much food all the time because they're always eating. And we have this really cute support dog. who's massive, and the kids love him. And turns out we sort of got him because, you know, there's all this, you know, literature and work around having animals around, but turns out that actually Moose, he's called, and if anyone's interested, he has his own Facebook page. And Moose collects more information than really we do, because a lot of times the kids would rather talk to Moose than us. And so when we're doing intakes, they choose where they want to do their intake, they choose when and how they want to talk to us. If they don't want to tell us everything, fine. If you want to tell Moose, that's more than fine. Like, we're good with that. You don't need to come into an office, you don't need to stare at our eyes, you don't need to tell one more adult human what you've gone through. So we do whatever it takes with the kids to get them to talk about what they need to help us to be able to get help to them. The new thing that we've started now within the last 8 months is, one of the things we're noticing is the hub was really doing a good job of actually identifying what the gaps were, not what us as service providers thought the gaps were. And so one of the gaps was transportation. Youth who are not able to get to appointments are going to fall through the cracks. And so we're able to write for and secure a vehicle. And now we are actually able to take the hub from Camrose into rural locations and meet kids out in a rural location and take the hub to them. And we do that through tablet, and we marry everything right back to where we are based out of Camrose. So all of that now has kind of monumentally shifted how we're working together, because you're able to connect the youth in their area to the services available in their area, and then move forward to what's available outside of their area. So we've seen some really interesting data collection. Recently we just did a poll on our last year, and I wrote down the numbers because they're stunning to us. We did this within the last 2 weeks, and I really need to say I'm still stunned at this data collection. 100% have increased resilience in the last year. 100 youth measured have increased connection to supports, and 100% of the youth have increased knowledge of where to access supports. I never thought in my career I would see numbers like that, and we think those are because of that. So we're incredibly excited about what we're seeing in terms of the capacity for youth and what that's meant for the rural capacity in our province of Alberta.
Wow, thank you, that's amazing. And it seems from this demonstration by Jessica, thank you, that Camrose might be the insight as to how we can make this dream achievable for successful youth mental health integrated services. Especially considering that you have services available for 365 days of the year, where young people are able to access this without needing to have barriers to access it. And I think from your experience and describing this hub to us, which is amazing, and what we've been able to witness the past 2 days, is that food and therapy dog can be very beneficial. And one thing that really struck out to me that seems very amazing, that I think we should be taking note on how we can improve our agencies, is working within our governments to change policies and laws, and ensuring that a young person doesn't get re-traumatized by repeating their story to every political